Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Smuce panels. My name is Garv, and we have today with us Abby from Project Everest Ventures. I'll pass this on to Abby to first introduce what Project Everest is. Yeah.
Thanks, Gav. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm going to go through a bit of the context of what we do at Project Everest just to explain our overall mission and the context of our work, sort of the space that we're working in and the reasons why it's necessary. And then I'll talk about some student experiences, my own experiences, and I know that Gav's prepared some questions for me at the end. So we'll get into, I'm just going to quickly talk about, I suppose, my background so that you have that context on me as well. So my current role is the University Engagement Coordinator, which essentially just means that I am that middle person between us at Project Everest and universities, which is where we build those opportunities for students to get a bridge into what we're doing. So I'm in that middle space of making sure that there's as many opportunities as possible, that it's communicated properly, and then therefore that means we get the best people possible to be working on the projects. I only recently graduated, so this is a new role for me, and I finished a Bachelor's of Environmental Science at RMIT. And within that time, I did a lot of internships, and one of them was Project Everest, and I've spent 4 months overseas working on different projects and in different leadership capacities, which I will talk about a little bit later, but that's sort of the snapshot of who I am and what my role is within the organisation. And before we talk about the rest of the stuff today, I would like to just make an acknowledgement to country. So we would like to pay our respects to traditional owners of country, elders past, present and emerging. And we would also like to recognise that this land was never ceded. So at Project Everest, we work in the development space, which is focusing on those targets set by the United Nations, which I'm sure a lot of people would be quite familiar with. Now, these Sustainable Development Goals are set to be achieved in the next 10 years, and we are working alongside government initiatives, charities, NGOs, other social enterprises to make sure that we can be moving towards a better future and improving the current state of the planet, which even before a pandemic, but especially now, conditions were pretty bleak and we had a lot of work to do. So this is a statistic that is just highlighting on a global scale the overwhelming wealth and resource disparity. And this is, this was very well articulated by an Oxfam study in 2017 that found that 8 men in a wealthy country can have more wealth between them than 3.6 billion around the world. And that's staggering in and of itself, but then there's obviously the consequences of that and the implications of that. So what we still see is that 690 million people go to bed hungry every night, and 690 million people, obviously we understand it's a big number, but what that actually is almost 30 times the population of Australia. So it's pretty staggering. And speaking of Australia, when you do sort of look at other issues that are present in this country, there's a huge gap that exists between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians that it requires addressing, and the implications of sort of systemic racism flow on to things like health impacts and high rates of incarceration, and I could go on. But not only is it a global issue, it definitely is faced here in Australia. And then there's the pandemic, and that is having terrible and devastating implications all over the world and over different industries. And what we see in development is that upon analysis of how it's going to impact our future, that progress that we wanted to see in the next 10 years on the Sustainable Development Goals is being pushed back 10 years in some areas. And then in some of those really developing regions, some of them are looking at an additional 30 years of work to make the same progress. So it's going to be a struggle ahead. And as well, even if you're looking at, that's not only sort of for the areas of development, but how it affects us as students. I'm studying my master's at the moment. The graduate landscape and how it's going to look for jobs is also pretty challenging. In Australia, we were expecting to hit that 10% mark of unemployment by Christmas. it's not going to be quite that number now by the sounds of it, which is good. But, you know, if we were to reach 10, that's 2 million people in Australia. So that's quite intense as well. So there's heaps of stuff to be done in development, and that's all of these sort of issues come under that development umbrella. And there's a lot of people working on this. So many people have been looking at it for a really long time, but ultimately, you know, these challenges are only going to become more immense with climate change and with all other factors. And we've been doing the same thing for so long. We need to start looking at other ways that we can innovate so that we can get ahead of these challenges rather than just trying to stay on top of them. And if you think about it, there is almost 8 billion people on the planet. If every single person could contribute to solving these problems in their own small way, then we could really get a leg ahead of them. And there is something that we all interact with day to day, even if we do it without thinking about it, and that's business. And you might think, how exactly is that? But the way that you as an individual interact with business every day is all the way from your toilet paper to the food that you eat. And that's where, if there was a positive impact built into each of those interactions, then we could have that leg up that I'm talking about. And this might seem like an ambiguous idea that I'm speaking about, so I'm going to bring in some examples. And they're Australian examples as well, which is nice. So the first one, if you think about the problems of food insecurity, growing populations, and climate change, there is an Australian company called Sundrop, which is a solar-powered hydroponic farm that produces year-round organic tomatoes in the Port Augusta desert region of South Australia. And the way they've addressed these problems is by successfully being the only farm that produces all of the tomatoes that are stocked in Coles supermarkets around the country. So their success illustrates that there is a possibility of working in a world where food, water, land, energy, and all other resources are scarce. If you can increase efficiency and increase that sustainability, one farm can produce all the tomatoes for all of the supermarkets, all of the Coles supermarkets in Australia. So pretty great example. I do have another one, and it's around toilet paper. So if you think about problems that might seem unrelated, you have within the development space, you may or may not be aware of it, but sourcing sustainable funding can be a really big issue, and particularly charities face this a lot. But also on another topic, there's 4% of deaths that occur every year are because we do not have equal and safe access to drinking water. So the way that Who Gives a Crap, which you might have heard of, this other Australian social enterprise, handles these problems is through the sales of toilet paper, and the profits of that go to support water, hygiene and sanitation projects in developing countries around the world. Simon, the CEO and co-founder, thought that it would make the most sense to use the purchase of everyday objects as a way to source sustainable funding for these development projects that he was so passionate about. Previously, he'd worked in a lot of NGOs and was constantly frustrated by that issue. So he thought, how can I marry the two? He had he had a background in business and economics, and he thought, where can I bridge this gap? And Who Gives a Crap has successfully proven that it's completely possible, and they're able to donate 50% of their profits annually. So that's almost $6 million they were able to donate. And what's exciting about that is as the business grows and as their profits grow, they can actually donate even more money if they stick with that model. So as your profits grow, the impact grows as well. Now, these are just two examples, and I am leading into connecting how this is the space and a very similar way into which we at Project Everest work. So we're using social enterprise to solve social issues. So business for social issues. And we've been doing this for some time. So this is a few pictures of our work overseas, because the past 4 years we've done work exclusively overseas and in a wide range of different projects. So depending on the needs of the communities that we're living in, we bring in different startup businesses that all have that social mind that connect to those United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And what you're seeing in the pictures above are teams and students assisting on the projects in agriculture, in female hygiene and sanitation, that's up the top, that's a consultation there, and solar and microfinance and all these different areas. So we've been doing this for some time and it's been going really well. I'm going to talk about what we're doing, obviously, in the face of COVID when you can't travel, but that is what we've been doing, and that model has really been working. I wanted to touch here on some specifics for engineers, because I know that all the people tuning in today will be either chemical engineers or within engineering. And this is actually Dylan and I were roommates in Timor. And this is a quote as I was doing my research and pulling all these slides together for you today. I came across this quote from him and I thought it was really great, because he spent 3 consecutive months in Timor working on the recycling project. And I only spent the 1 month with him, but he was a veteran, he'd been there for a while. And I thought it was really interesting to see what his feedback was as a chemical engineer, and also someone who was studying maths and computer science. So he's from the University of Adelaide. But I think that this really ties together that a lot of our projects, and this really well articulates that a lot of our projects have engineering components. And so someone who is studying these kinds of degrees can get a lot out of it. And we do this intentionally to ensure that future engineers can get the experience that they need to be impactful in their future. Because if you think about it, anyone that is interested in our work is thinking about how they can use their degree for sustainability. They're thinking about the ethics of it, or they're conscious of the social side, beg your pardon. And that's why they sort of get drawn to this. And so we want to make sure that there is a place for them to develop those skills, but also to develop the engineering side. This varies really differently based on individuals for their individual interests, or the area of engineering that they're studying, or what the student themselves wants to develop, whatever kind of skills they're looking, or weaknesses they're looking at developing further, so they can take that on with them. Now, our projects, and I want to stress this, our projects are not for engineers to build engineering skills. It's not like an engineering project. We're not an engineering firm. It's looking at those adjacent skills. And where I think that this offers something that is a really great complement to your engineering degree or other engineering experience that you get, is it's the opportunity to step out or to the side of an engineering mindset and think about how what you are doing with your skills and what you're doing with the things that you are learning apply to the real world, and what impact they can have for good. And then on top of that, we're also looking at providing that additional and professional training and resilience building, because what we've been able to say previously is, my God, if you can work on a project and think about how it's going to impact other people, if you can work on that, which you're going to be looking at doing across your career in one way or another, but if you can do that in the humidity in a developing country, you can sure as hell do it in an air-conditioned office in Australia. So I hope you had a chance to read through that quote from Dylan. It's a really good one. The other thing that I do want to touch on for engineers is that there is a huge amount of alignment with our field work and the EA Stage 1 competencies. So because we're offering, we call them internships, but that's really for a level of recognition between us and you, but they're more so programs. And the program means that there's a lot of fostered learning. There's a lot of sort of workshops and things around that provide that training, almost like a really in-depth and sort of interactive course at uni. So what we've seen is that they definitely mirror the Stage 1 competencies, and we strongly believe that your work is valuable and that it should be recognised. So we've pulled some professional engineers together to support students when they come on either our rural or our global programs to meet those Stage 1 competencies. So that's definitely a possibility, and lots of engineers have done it before. So I've alluded to the fact that we're not doing our global opportunities at the moment. They are on pause. We are in a pandemic, and as much as I wish I could get over there and work on it, we just can't. But that doesn't mean that those projects that have been running are not being, have just been forgotten. So I want to take this opportunity to say that as an organisation, we're working with our partners that are in country, be it students from different universities or different stakeholders, to keep those programs going, so that they don't just fall by the wayside when all that good work's done. But it also gave us the space to look at how we can continue to have impact even in a pandemic, and it's completely possible. And what we've built is an Australian-based program, which is travelling to a rural area, which is quite similar to our global programs. It's just based in Australia. And then a virtual option as well, because virtual is sort of becoming quite a new norm. There's a lot of need to build skills in this area for young professionals, as well as a lot of the work ends up being on the side of that, of working with a team and of planning projects and doing research, and that kind of side can all be done from home and virtually. So this supports us in our mission to impact the lives of 1 billion people in the next 20 years. And that's why we've built these out. So we'll go through them. And I'm not going to go through all of the projects, but just some that I wanted to highlight that I thought might satisfy some of the interests of the people watching today, as well, the interest areas, but also where you might be able to see some synergy between your degree and some of our projects. So this is one I'm really passionate about because I've team led it twice. But diversity, race, technology, and DART. It's not the most self-explanatory title, but it's essentially working in agriculture. So DART is an Australian company. They actually were supported by the Bill Gates Foundation. And they are looking at how you can provide the genetic information of crops to farmers, so that, with information comes guidance, and that guidance and being able to make informed decisions around your crops means that you can safeguard against pests, disease, and other things that might affect those crops, and that directly influences food insecurity. So this is an incredible project, and we're looking at bringing it both. You can do that one both virtually or rurally in Australia. Another project is in ophthalmology, so looking at biotechnology in a way. But Four Eyes is an incredible business, and you can see the two founders there in the right side of the screen. They developed these flat pack glasses and a prescription sort of, it's a little unit that allows anybody to be trained in prescribing glasses for corrective eyewear glasses in 30 minutes. So the entire model is really exciting because it's looking at how can there's 61% of vision loss in Australia currently can be corrected with glasses. So it's usually quite, expensive to do that, and it can be hard to get out to areas where you can go through the process of being prescribed glasses. But if you can provide a system that can be integrated into a community and anyone can be trained to prescribe it, and then the glasses themselves are accessible and affordable, then you can alleviate those issues around vision loss. So that's both going to happen rurally, and then you can work on that project online as well. Then there is the AntiPoaching and AI technology project. This one is really, really exciting. It's looking at the potential, and so doing those initial parts of a project for how can we use AI technology to assist with anti-poaching in Australia, also anti-poaching in Africa. So you can do that sort of via the online program, or shark detection. So early shark detection because using the shark lines obviously catches a lot of, you get a lot of bycatch, so it's quite harmful to marine life, and also doesn't really catch that many sharks. We still have shark attacks, so the system's not working, and looking at how AI technology could alleviate that. So the company that we partner with is already successfully doing this in Africa, and their technology is able to distinguish between friend, poacher, and animal. So to be able to use that and apply that to different settings is what that project's going to look at. And then the last one that I'm going to touch on is the business consulting one. So if you haven't heard of bee clinics or bee corporations, they're really, really interesting, and I really encourage you to have a look into them because they're the future. But it's a bee clinic is someone who has been certified by a third party to a certain standard of having a sustainable and ethical business practice. So we satisfy that at Project Everest. We're certified B Corp, and they also do this for other Australian and New Zealand businesses. So students that work on this particular project will be looking at consulting on how other businesses can make their projects their businesses as sustainable and as ethical as possible. And I thought I'd just throw a few name drops in there just so that you can really, because what is B certified might not mean much to you right now, but other sort of B certified businesses in Australia and New Zealand include Patagonia, Keep Cup, The Guardian, Who Gives a Crap, and then us. So that's a really exciting project, and it's definitely one that would be outside sort of the ideas of engineering, but if you wanted to get breadth in your skill development, would be a really interesting one, because if you're consulting on sustainability and increasing sustainability and ethical practice that can be applied to anything. So the quick details on this is the virtual one because it's the one that's coming up soon. There are more details on the rural projects on our website, but I wanted to go through sort of the virtual ones today. It's 4 weeks online. The start dates are actually quite soon, so you want to look at sort of asking questions and getting in touch with us pretty quickly to be involved. And then because of virtual, like you can imagine what a rural program might look like, which would be sort of living there for, it's 2 weeks if you're on the rural program. So you're living there, working there. You can sort of visualize that a bit more. It's kind of like extended field work. But then the virtual one, you might think, how do you even make that happen? And how do you work with a team across this distance? But the first one that we ran went really, really well. And I was completely blown away at the standard of the students that came out on the other end of the program, because, you know, there's companies like Facebook and Twitter are looking at having roles in the future that are completely working from home, because and yet none of us are trained in the skills to be professional or understand maybe the social etiquette around working online. So what we saw from the students start to finish was really cool. But this is kind of what a general sort of an everyday would look like. It's also quite flexible. So daily stand up is when you come together with your team and talk about your goals for the day and set your sort of tasks and initiatives. And if there's anything that anyone needs to get done that day that needs to be brought up, it's all done there. And then you'd go into a masterclass or a workshop. So you can pick different electives, but there are core units in there, and these all sum up to the completion of a certificate in social impact consulting. And then you complete that learning online module as a response to the workshop, and then you go into your project development time, and the virtual networking lunch or the project development of facilitated check-in would be with a member of the Project Everest team or a member of one of the businesses for the projects that you're working on. And then if you had anything due that day, it's about 4 o'clock. But there is some leniency within that. We've had our first Malaysian students sign up. We have students from New Zealand, from America, from the UK, all coming on board with this. And it's a really great way to look at expanding your network beyond Australia as well. So it's quite different, but in areas where it's different to being there in person, it also opens up a wider world because you can go anywhere across the online. So that's quite the bulk of things about Project Everest, our work, the context. I know that Garb's going to have some questions for me. So I suppose, Garb, my question is, I had a few slides about my experience. Did you want to go through the questions first, or would you like me to continue on and just go through these bits about me first?
Yeah, I think it's perfect for you to continue. Keep up this.
Okay, no worries. Awesome. I thought I would just put some pictures together and show some of the highlights of my time overseas with Project Everest. So that when I mentioned we had that quote from Dylan, and I mentioned that I've been in Timor, that was my first month away. I, in all honesty, didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I was not the best student at that point in time because I kind of was just throwing my hand up for everything and not really doing my research on what I was getting into. I mean, I landed on my feet. It was all good, but I kind of walked in not really knowing what I was getting into. And then I just fell in love with the work. I knew I wanted to have experiences overseas. That was my first thing, because I knew that was important for science. It's important across a lot of industries to have global context and global experience. So I knew I needed to do that. I knew that Project Everest was looking at sort of sustainability, and it was quite ethical, and that was something that was important to me. So that was good, but that was pretty much all that I knew. And I knew I was going to Timor. So I was on my plane and got there, and then I just had the most incredible month. That's my team to the left. We worked on the recycling project. It was like working every day, and then weekends we spent together, and we got to experience living in this country for a month. And it was like nothing. I'd done quite a bit of travel beforehand, but it was like nothing I'd experienced before. And I learned a lot about how much I didn't know about business, and how much I didn't know about being a professional, and how much I didn't know that science could have a greater impact than what I was being taught at uni. So this just blew my mind. And from there, I knew that I had to continue on with the organization for the rest of my time at uni. And now, you know, coincidentally, it's happened that I'm still with them. And so I went through my team leadership training. And that was one of the most intense experiences of my life. It part of the entire program, like the core part of the program for your leadership training, is doing a week-long immersive section where we all flew up to Sydney. You are all put into sort of teams, and you're staying in like a campground for an entire week. And through that period, you just there's 2 trainers to every person being trained, and within that there's people who are directly training you, and then there's people who are acting as people from a developing country. And so they do this to entirely set the scene and completely immerse you into the challenges that you would face on the job. So that style of training, it included sort of, I don't want to give too much away in case people end up doing it, but it included sleep deprivation, food deprivation. It included having to respond to crisis situations if they ever to happen, but also how to make the most impact with business, and building business skills and building professional skills and team skills. And it was really transformative. I was someone who was incredibly insecure about my own capabilities, and I didn't think that a week could transform a person so much. But I sort of came out of there really knowing the things that I needed to work on, and had already made progress on that, and knowing my strengths a lot more clearly. So that set me up for the first month that I team led. And I've team led twice, but I've really only showed pictures for one of the times because Fiji was incredibly aesthetic. And I'm going to talk about India in a moment. But my first month team leading was in India, and the second was in Fiji. And this is my team, and they're absolutely beautiful. This is actually the backdrop to what we're standing on, is our backyard. So we stay in Sigatoka, which is about an hour's drive from Suva, if anyone's been to Fiji. And it was the first month team leading, my gosh, I thought the training was hard, but actually doing it was even harder, but also so much more rewarding. And both times I worked on agriculture, so I got to see that in a different context. And both groups of people were so vastly different. What I thought I worked out in my first month, in terms of the dynamics of people, I had in both months I've team led, I've had students with English as a second language, students with different levels of emotional intelligence, or directly applicable skills, different levels of personal sort of insecurities and doubts about their abilities, or people with different strengths and weaknesses. And in the first month, they were all such close friends. In the second month, not as much, but then we worked together to see how they could come together as a team to get as much done as possible. And we were able to survey, I forget the number, I feel like we surveyed over 80 different people within the rural villages of Fiji. And that was such an accomplishment when you think about how hot it is, walking around and doing that. But they were incredible. And not only did I learn a lot, not only did we get so much done, but I learned a lot from that experience. I learned a lot from them. And I could go on and on raving about these experiences. But for me, what I think you here listening today could take away from it is, it's one of the biggest things that I get asked about when I've gone for volunteering opportunities or job opportunities. It's the first thing they want to hear about, because all of the examples that I have are completely relevant to, and sort of exemplary when you look at being able to provide examples for jobs in Australia, because I've already led a team and looked at really dynamic problems and challenges in a context that I'm unfamiliar with, and then been able to have success in those areas. So they were really great experiences. But then one that was also really incredible, and the last months that I spent overseas, which was February of this year, if you can believe it. To think that I traveled in 2020 is a bit bizarre, but this was when I was senior leading. So after the first time I team lead, I went back voluntarily for some reason to receive more immersive training to be a senior leader. And that is that next level up, looking at not only being in charge of one group of people, so maybe 6 or so in a team, or 7 in a team, and one project, but being able to look at those higher level challenges. So how do you care for and create a supportive and efficient environment for 40, 50 people on the ground in a developing country? And how do you support the progress of multiple projects and support the team leaders that lead those projects from a more senior position? And I was the second in charge on the ground in India. And so it was the second, I got to go back. I got to, this is Lipsa in the picture. She's one of our interns. And I was part of bringing her onto our projects in the first month I was there. And then I got to see her again later. She's incredible. She started her own business looking at metal straws within Bhubaneswar. She's just, adore her. And I got to deepen those connections, look at those higher level stakeholder relationships, and also be responsible and connect with a larger group of students on the ground. And you can see some of the students in the picture to the left. This was one of my biggest challenges, was just making sure there was enough water for everybody, because sometimes the person who would refill all of those bottles would just jump around between different stalls in the community, and I just couldn't find him. And so I would have to go around with my phone and a picture of the water gallons and be like, where is this? Where is this? Because I had 30 people back at home who were thirsty. So and that in and of itself is just an example that I can apply to being able to have to find a challenging situation under high levels of stress, which you wouldn't think that it was, but it was, and adapt to that and just get something done and recognize your own responsibility, and that if you don't do it, no one has water. So yeah, so much learning that I've done. I actually did all of my 4 months across a year. So I did that all within a year. And it's part of the reason why I stayed on, and now I'm in this graduate role, but I hope it's come across, I'm really passionate about the work that we do and the organization that I work for. And I think for students at university, I experienced this. I felt like all I was told is that you go into academia or you can go into industry. And I had all these other passions, all these other interests, and all these other things I wanted to learn about. And I didn't feel like they were facilitated. But I got a lot more of that, and I got a lot more life experience and training and, so much out of the experiences that I had with Project Everest. So I hope that that's come across. I'm ready for your questions, Gav, but what I'm going to do is leave this up on the screen. It's a bit of a shortcut way, if you are interested in doing this yourself, to get in touch with us. So you can scan the QR code from your phone. You can just pull up your camera. I have an iPhone, so it just happens from my camera, or you can do it from, if you have a QR code scanner. I'm sure Gav will probably put a link on this recording so that you can hit that as well. It's just so that our team, when they talk to you, have context that you heard this presentation from me, and they'll be able to make sure that they can give you the best information, answer any of your questions, and help you get involved. But thank you. I hope that was all the information that you required. Gav, if I've missed anything, please ask away.
That was a beautiful presentation. I guess in that short amount of time, I myself learned a lot more than I would go attending a normal seminar, because the sort of experiences that you've shared, those are very, first of all, they're highly relevant, and then they're extremely personal. And that makes your experience completely unique. And I believe if anyone who's joining Project Everest would go through the same, they would develop their own set of skills and their own set of experiences. So I believe overall this is like an exciting and an amazing way to gain skills. And when I say skills, like even whether you're an engineer or you are someone interested in engineering, it does not matter as long as you can apply and get the skills, as long as you're passionate about it. So
yeah, thank you. That's really lovely to say.
It depends on the person themselves, whether they're passionate to learn or not. So
definitely. And I think even for me, I've been the team leader to a lot of people. I've been in different levels of relationships with different people that come through Project Everest. So I work with the core team now, but before that I've worked with students really closely in a team, or more widely in a group that I'm looking after, or as one of the team members with my first internship. So I've seen all these different people across, and all the people that I did my leadership training with, you do it with about 40 other people. And the network that I've built is really great. So I've seen so many different people come through, and I think even that, all these people stay within my network and I catch up with, and I feel so blessed to be part of that community of people that would want to get involved with something like this. So yeah, that was just what came to my mind.
Absolutely. Like one of the key things that I've learned, like in university, is networking is key, and this is one of the best ways that you can get to know your peers, and also gain some good leadership skills on top of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, one of the few questions that I had was the programs that you talked about, like they are very, very interesting. And you said that you joined as like an intern. You did an internship, and then you went on to perform as a team leader and then as a senior lead. So could you
Yeah.
tell us more information about the sort of leadership programs or the ventures that like Project Everest has?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with, I suppose, we'll start with the ventures. So, and I'm talking about sort of the international ones. I've touched enough, I think, on the rural and virtual options that you can look at now. But there is always that future of we'll be able to go overseas again eventually, and all those ventures that we have going. We're looking at things like microfinance. We're looking at agriculture. We look at female hygiene and sanitation, so access to products that can help women to manage their periods. We look at fuel, so sustainable fuel, so some biogas or some rocket stove style products, and these kinds of things range across different countries, so you can get involved with different ones. And I've learned about different projects, but I suppose that's the only thing I would say to the ventures. And there's heaps of details of that on our website. And there's a lot on YouTube, actually. We have this really great student who he's now working, but he was a student that would do all of our filming and create videos and content for us. And oh my God, they look beautiful. And you can see the different countries that we work in. So that's really good. About the leadership program, I will tell you as much as I can without giving too much away. So it's quite, the idea of it is that if I gave all of the details, anyone that did it wouldn't learn as much. So once you have done your internship, you perform, I suppose, well on that internship program, displaying key skills like teamwork, like ability to work in a team, high emotional intelligence, or at least the capacity to build those skills, a keen eye for social enterprise, and I suppose just being a generally high performer on one of the internship programs, you can apply to go through the team leadership training. So I did that, and I didn't think that I could, honestly. I looked at the caliber of the team leaders when I was an intern. I was 22. I think I was 22. I was 22 or 21. 22, I think. And yeah, I was 22, and my team leaders, almost all of them, were younger than me, including the senior leaders. And I perceived them to be about 27, 28. So there's not like a 20-year-old who I thought was like 27, and only, you know, it's an interesting thing. So you look at that person and go, yeah, of course they're young, but the way that they held themselves, the way that they spoke, the capabilities that they displayed as a leader in another country, to me, I internally just put them at this higher level of authority. And immediately that goes to age. So I was so shocked to find out. And I thought, gosh, what is happening in this training? How do I get that? I want that. But at the same time, my own insecurities told me that I wouldn't be able to do it. The idea of not getting, sleep is one thing, but for me, I was like, food? How am I going to go without food? And not that you do, you're not starved, I promise. But throughout the training, and I did sort of say that you're there for a week, you're in a campground kind of situation. Think if you've ever gone away on a school camp in junior school or high school. And but everybody around you is acting as if you were in another country. So you have a few trainers and they're displayed with their sort of uniforms, and then everybody else are these other characters. And so for the first part, you get a bit of training. And so you get the core fundamental things that you need to learn. So through some workshops, but those workshops run quite long. And so you're even tired sort of just by taking in all of that information. And then after you're sort of given that basis in all of that, then you go into the proper immersion. And that's where you have these objectives to present your business idea. And they're usually modeled off a lot of our current projects, but you need to complete sort of almost like a month on project just in a few days. And you need to be able to present that at the end. But throughout that, you have other things that come up because there's so many other parts to team leading. There is, what happens if, I just don't want to give any of them away, so I'll try and come up with a scenario on the spot. It's kind of like, what if someone's mother called and a tragedy had happened at home, and then you have to be a supportive person and a good human being to that person that's happened to, and how do you handle that? So looking at those different fundamental humane challenges that come up when working in stressful situations, as well as the challenges of language barriers and communication, and when things are hard to communicate in different cultures, and then also the challenges of coming up with a social enterprise. So there's those kinds of things that you go through. So to get in, it wasn't like you apply and you get in. I went through an interview process, and of the sort of 200 people that applied, about 45 got in. So it is highly competitive. But I also, through that training and then through the placement, I received a certificate in leadership and management, which is sort of an Australian-wide recognised accreditation. And that's probably all I can really say on the leadership program without actually giving it away. The senior leadership one, just really briefly to cover, is a shorter period of time. It's a similar structure of learning, but really immersive, putting you under pressure. It's basically putting you under extreme pressure, so to see how you respond. And that's what I was interested in seeing, because I didn't feel like I knew myself well enough to say how I would respond. So to be tested in that, that was where a lot of the confidence that I took into country with me when I team led, took into my graduate job, and literally just took into my everyday life, that's where it came from. I think it was being put under extreme pressure and then knowing how I respond. Am I fight, flight, freeze? What stuff can I learn? Where are my weaknesses lie, and how do I get on top of them? So that's as much as I can say about the topic.
I think that's very detailed, and I believe that this leadership program does provide those really quality, as you said, it provides you with accreditation, and I'm pretty sure it provides you with more than enough experience for you to apply when you're going to get a job, or when you're going for some sort of workplace. For workplaces, I'm sure you've developed a lot of networks, and I'm sure other students do the same, and they obtain their skill sets and all, and then move off to continuing their careers. Do you have
definitely
insight into how successful students are after doing an internship, or let's say after being a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish I had some more names to drop. I know that because I'm not in the engineering scene, I suppose, because I don't know all the big names, but I know that Oricon's a big one. We've had, some of our alumni have gone on to work at places like Oricon, Blue Steel, have gotten really high profile jobs, or a lot of them actually start their own businesses from this knowledge. And I can talk about that myself. I have had friends that came out of my degree with me and have then looked as, scientists or environmental engineers, a lot of them, because those two degrees at RMIT are quite intertwined. So did a lot of sort of environmental engineering classes, but they were looking at how they could start their own businesses after uni without any experience. And I was able to consult for them on what they wanted to do, and they were blown away. And these are friends of mine. They were blown away by, oh my God, how did you know how to do this? These were things that I never would have thought of. And, just things like, don't go and spend $10,000 buying all of these supplies for a business before you know that anyone actually wants it. And they were like, oh. So just heaps of stuff that I built there that they are using and then they have succeeded with. I think there's heaps of sort of alumni stories on our website, and on our Instagram is a really good way to keep up with it. And sort of different Project Everest alumni there, but that's a few of them. I know that I can really only speak to those ones that get sort of those high level jobs and then come back and talk to us about it. I can talk about, and that's sort of like the Oricon and Blue Steel. There's my experience. It's just, I haven't really had many no's, honestly, since doing this and being able to use it as an experience. So, I mean, you can take that as you will. I don't know if it would have changed, but I believe that I can attest it to that. But then people who have been in my team, like just today, I had two people who had been a part of my team ask me to be their not recommender, oh my God, reference. Wow.
Yeah.
It's been a long day already. Be their referee for their CVs. And then there's been other students who have done that and been part of my teams and come back and just said, thank you for being that, because I got the job because of your recommendation and because of the experience that you could provide me. So I definitely see it as a huge asset to career building, because we focus and we have a huge element of, like I mentioned, our mission is to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people in 20 years. And I think a lot of people hear that as our mission and think, okay, cool, so that's all the overseas work. It is, but so much of it is with the students. So, someone getting their dream job because they can use experience from our programs, that's positively impacting their lives. And we've been able to do that a lot as well.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I believe like your influence and all the experiences from the students would be really beneficial by Project Everest. Finally, what advice would you give to students interested in doing an internship at Project Everest?
What advice? I can go for a few things. I think my first advice would be do the rural program. That's a very personal level advice, I want to say, because I'm looking at it being built out and I'm so excited to be able to lead on them. So I'm hoping to be one of the people who goes away and leads on it. That will look like that will come about. And I'm just so excited for the potential to having, had experience going through these programs overseas, to see what we're going to be able to do in Australia. But also because I think it's absolutely right. The pandemic taught us that we can do this incredible work, not only overseas, but at home. And there's so many things at home to address, just the fact that 61% of vision loss in Australia can be cured with relatively simple prescriptive glasses. So I just think that there's heaps of things to address within our own country, and I'm really excited to do that. So my recommendation would be to do the rural program, and particularly for engineers. So like that sort of panel that you can see on the screen just to the right, that's for the rural program. And I think particularly for engineers, it's a really big one. Another piece of advice, I think that's alongside which one I sort of recommend that you do, would be go into the interview, go into the internship, and go beyond that, potentially, even because our alumni community is really big. We hold lots of events to keep sort of every single person who's been involved in it, the opportunity to stay involved as much as they want to, but also those that go into leadership. And so the leadership alumni, I think we need to take into the entire thing is the idea of teamwork, being not only the best person for you and your development, but the best person to push the team forward and the best person to push the project forward. So it's thinking about your own growth, the growth of the people around you and in your team, and the impact the project can have. So think about that collective mindset is a really big one, because so often do I see sort of top performers come into interviews ready to wow me, and they don't, because they are so focused on demonstrating what they can do that they squash other people in the process, and that's not what we're about. So that's one of the biggest things. And I suppose the other thing is just come in ready to learn, ready to strip any sort of preconceived weaknesses, any sort of like ideas that you have about, just come into the situation ready to learn and have that super open mind, and you'll take in a lot. There is a wealth of information, knowledge, and experience that we're more than happy to share. So it's a great opportunity to pull that.
Sounds amazing.
And I think that would be it.
Yeah. I think that is all for my questions.
Good.
Abby, for showing us how amazing Project Everest is and all the different experiences and the projects.
Mm-hmm. I'll leave that one up on the screen. Sorry, that would have just been flashing past and really distracting. Please continue with your thank you.
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. I really loved being involved with it. I think Smuce is an incredible society. I work with a lot of societies in my role, and I think that you guys do incredible work. You're really devoted to ensuring that students can see the industry experience that is available to them, but not just the stuff that you know, is already being plastered to you by a university. Like, you're really committed to the student experience. And I've had the pleasure of coming to your industry night and getting to meet you in the committee, and a really big fan is all I'll
Absolutely, we
say then.
appreciate
Thank you
that.
so much. No worries. Well, I guess we'll say goodbye. Thank you so much. And to any students who listen today or listen in the future on this recording, I hope to see you on our projects, and definitely let me know that this is where you saw it from. I'd love to hear it.
Thank you.
Thanks.